5 years ago today, 9 black parishioners were killed by a white gunman during a Bible study class at a Charleston, South Carolina church. The Emanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church, known to many as Mother Emanuel, is the oldest AME church in the South. The tragic death of those parishioners raised many questions about race, the Confederate flag, and gun control, similar questions that are still echoing today. CBS News political contributor Antjuan Seawright wrote about the shooting in an article published today on BET.com. He joins me now from Columbia, South Carolina. Hi, Antjuan. You have a personal connection to the shooting. Can you share that with us?
Well, there's several personal connections. As I've said before on this network, I'm fifth generation AME. Mother Emanuel, when you're growing up in the AME Church, you know the significance of Mother Emanuel Church. As you said in your opening, one of the oldest African-American Episcopal church in the South. It was once burned down during the church burnings of that day. The parishioners had to worship in secret while the church was being rebuilt. The church was then rebuilt to where it is now today. The other connection I have to the shooting is the Reverend Senator Clemente Pinckney. I worked with him in the South Carolina General Assembly. He was a dear friend to my family. I still fellowship with his 2 daughters and his wife. And so I got to see him in many respects as a senator who cared about his constituents, but also to work with him as a pastor who loved his God and believed as much as you've done it to the least of these, you've done it to me. And we would always talk about the ministry as I was struggling and deciding whether I was going to go into the ministry. And the one thing I remember Clem would always say is that I'd rather my life be a sermon than preach a sermon any day of the week. And so when we look back 5 years ago, there's no doubt in my mind his life was a magnificent sermon that the world was able to see preached in a real way.
And Antjuan, days and even weeks after the shooting, the country went through a significant debate over the Confederate flag. We are seeing those debates resurface now in the wake of George Floyd's death and others. What do you think is different now than wasn't that way 5 years ago when we were having that conversation?
Well, 5 years ago today at 8:16 p.m., a white supremacist by the name of Dylan Roof, who wanted to start a race war, walked into Mother Emanuel Church on Calhoun Street and pulled out his gun and decided to kill 9 people in the name of hate, bigotry, and racism. What's different now than what was different 5 years ago is the mood and the temperature of the country continues to change. Sadly, it took 9 people being killed in a church in order for us to come together to take down the Confederate battle flag off the grounds of the South Carolina State House. Sadly, it's taken Black and brown people being killed at the hands of law enforcement for us to look at monuments to be taken down, look at revamping laws to prevent these things from happening. And so, unfortunately, in our country's history, it sometimes takes massive event, or catastrophic event in some cases, in order for us to push towards progress and make change in this country. And so if there's a difference, the only difference is 9 people not murdered in a church, but Black and brown boys and girls were killed at the hands of law enforcement who were supposed to protect them. And Tanya, I'll say this, keep in mind 5 years ago around this time, it was unrest in Ferguson, Missouri because of what was going on there. It was unrest in Baltimore, Maryland. And just weeks before, maybe a week before, in Charleston, South Carolina, Walter Scott was killed by a white police officer, shot in the back and killed, all for, I think, a broken taillight. And so there are a lot of things that are similar today that were similar to then.
So you mentioned the man behind the shooting, Dylan Roof. He was charged with both federal and state charges, and in 2017, a federal jury sentenced him to death. Since the shooting, many on social media have called out the treatment he received when taken into custody versus African Americans when they are taken into custody. What's your take on that piece of it?
If you ask some little Antjuan Seawright growing up in rural South Carolina, how would you like to be rewarded for good behavior? I would probably have said in my younger days, take me to Burger King so I can get a meal. Dylan Roof, after a 13-hour manhunt found in North Carolina, was taken to Burger King by the cops for a meal. Ahmaud Arbery, uh, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, some others were taken to the sanctuary, not Burger King. And so historically, when you look at the mishandled and the mistreatment between Black and brown people and people who do not look like them when it comes to law enforcement, you cannot help but hold your head in prayer and say, Lord Jesus, why is this happening to them? Because it should not happen like this.
It should not, indeed. And Antjuan Seawright, thank you so much for joining us and talking about a piece of our painful history. Thank you.
Thank you.